Deep in the void of space, where few dared to venture, an old Terran relay station floated in silence. It had been operational for decades, watching, listening, but never speaking. It was a forgotten piece of machinery, lost in the vast darkness. Then, one day, it heard something. A signal, weak and broken, struggled through the static. At first, the station's AI dismissed it as background noise, interference from dying stars. But as the message continued, the system flagged it as urgent and relayed it to the Terran High Command. Admiral Marcus Rain was in the middle of a routine briefing when the emergency alert appeared on his console. He frowned. There hadn't been an emergency signal in years, not since the last border skirmish with the Drex Dominion. With a tap on the screen, he opened the transmission. The audio was barely coherent, static mixed with broken words. But the few words that did come through sent a chill down his spine. "They have returned. We are not enough." The message repeated once before cutting off completely. Rain stared at the screen. He had seen many distress signals in his time, but this one felt different. He turned to his communications officer. "Source?" he asked. "Sector 12-9, the officer replied. "Uncharted territory. The region was abandoned after the war centuries ago." Rain's expression darkened. That was no ordinary sector. It was the site of Eclipse 5, an ancient battlefield, a place where humanity had once fought a war so brutal that both sides had nearly been wiped out. No one had been there since. No one was supposed to be there. So who sent the message? And more importantly, who were they? Within minutes, High Command was in chaos. Analysts scrambled to decode the rest of the message, but the data was corrupted. The only thing they could confirm was that the signal was real. It wasn't a trick, a ghost transmission, or an old recording. It was live. Someone out there was sending a cry for help. Rain knew what had to be done. He accessed a secure channel, his voice cold and commanding. "Activate the fleet. Priority 1. Full battle readiness." Across the Terran sectors, ships that had been dormant for years roared to life. Humanity's most elite fleet, the Black Armada, was being called into action. Warships the size of cities powered up, their engines burning with raw energy. Soldiers and officers, some who had never seen combat before, prepared for battle. The Black Armada was not a force used lightly. It was a fleet summoned only when humanity was under direct threat. As the fleet prepared to depart, an encrypted file appeared on Rain's personal screen. It was an old classified report from the last war fought in Eclipse 5. He opened it, scanning the details. The final words of the report made his blood run cold. "Enemy forces neutralized. No survivors detected. But if they ever return, if they ever evolve, we may not survive the next war." Rain clenched his fists. He didn't know who or what was waiting for them in Eclipse 5, but one thing was certain. Humanity's most feared fleet was about to find out. The Black Armada moved through the darkness of space like a silent storm, its massive warships cutting through the void toward the coordinates of the distress signal. Each vessel was a floating fortress, armed with weapons powerful enough to turn entire planets into dust. This was not an ordinary fleet. It was a force built for one purpose: absolute destruction of any threat to humanity. Admiral Marcus Rain stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Ironclad, his expression unreadable as he stared at the holomap displaying their destination. Eclipse 5. A place that had not been spoken of for centuries, a battlefield buried in history. And now, for reasons unknown, something there had sent a desperate cry for help. The officers around him worked in tense silence, their movements precise. Even the younger crew members who had never seen real combat knew what it meant when the Black Armada was deployed. This was not a mission of peace. It never was. It was an execution waiting to happen. The fleet moved in tight formation, battle-ready, shields raised, weapons charged. No one was taking chances. As they neared the sector, the tension thickened. The distress signal had stopped broadcasting, leaving only eerie silence in its wake. That was never a good sign. Rain had been in too many battles to ignore the feeling in his gut. Something was wrong. Then, as they approached the planet's orbit, the sensors screamed with warnings. The wreckage of countless ships floated aimlessly, twisted metal drifting like a graveyard in the void. At first, it looked like remnants of the ancient war fought here long ago. But a closer scan revealed fresh wrecks, ships destroyed recently, their hulls still leaking energy. Someone had fought here and lost. A boarding team was deployed, moving carefully through the debris field toward what seemed to be the source of the distress signal, a ruined Terran station that had no business being here. Its outer walls were scorched, its defensive turrets melted into slag. Inside, the corridors were dark, the emergency lights flickering weakly. Blood smeared the walls. Something had happened here. Something brutal. Then they found him, a lone survivor, barely breathing, hidden beneath fallen debris. His armor was shattered, his helmet cracked, but his eyes still held the fire of a soldier who refused to die. When they pulled him from the wreckage, his first words came out in a broken whisper. "We were not enough. They've evolved." He coughed, his body trembling with exhaustion, but he forced himself to speak. "They came from nowhere. We thought they were gone. We were wrong." Rain's grip on his console tightened as he listened to the report from the boarding team. The words of the wounded soldier were enough to confirm his worst fear. The enemy that had once nearly wiped out humanity, the race that had been fought extinct, was back. And this time, they were stronger. Before anyone could process the full weight of the situation, the fleet's alarms blared with sudden urgency. The sensors had picked up movement, hundreds of unidentified ships surrounding them, hidden behind the wreckage, waiting. A trap. The realization came too late. In a flash, the void exploded with weapons fire as the unseen enemy revealed itself. The Black Armada had walked straight into an ambush. The battle had begun. Space erupted into chaos as the enemy fleet emerged from the darkness, their ships unlike anything humanity had faced before. They were sleek, fast, and moved with an unnatural precision, their formations shifting like a predator circling its prey. The first barrage struck hard, energy beams cutting through the void, hammering against the Terran shields. The ironclad trembled under the impact, but its defenses held. Across the fleet, the battle stations roared to life, weapons systems locking onto targets. The Black Armada was taken by surprise, but it did not panic. Humanity had fought too many wars, had been pushed to the edge of extinction too many times to break under pressure. The response was immediate and brutal. The dreadnoughts unleashed hell, railguns firing at near-light speeds, tearing into the enemy ranks. Missiles streaked through space, leaving glowing trails before detonating in brilliant bursts of destruction. But the enemy adapted quickly. They were fast, too fast, weaving through the Terran fire like specters in the dark. Their ships didn't just dodge. They anticipated, reacting to attacks before they even landed. It was almost as if they could predict the Armada's moves. On the bridge of the ironclad, Admiral Rain's mind raced. This wasn't normal. Even the most advanced, AI-driven fleets didn't move like this. Then the realization struck him. These weren't just ships piloted by soldiers. The ships themselves were alive, evolved. The enemy had taken the technology from their last war and improved it in ways humanity had never imagined. The Black Armada wasn't just fighting an enemy fleet. They were fighting a hive, a collective intelligence that learned and adapted with every passing second. The battle intensified. Terran ships exploded as the enemy found weaknesses in their formations, exploiting them with terrifying efficiency. Fighters screamed through the battlefield, engaged in deadly dogfights where even a single mistake meant instant death. The ironclad fired its main cannons, obliterating an enemy cruiser in one devastating blast. But for every ship destroyed, two more seemed to take its place. It was a war of attrition, and humanity was losing ground fast. The communications channel was filled with frantic voices, captains shouting battle reports, calls for reinforcements, damage assessments. But through the chaos, one transmission cut through the noise, a distress beacon. Not from the enemy, not from a damaged ship. From the ruined station they had found earlier. The same station that had sent the original SOS. Rain's eyes narrowed. Why was the signal coming from there now, in the middle of the battle? Was it a coincidence? Or was it something more? Get me visuals on that station, he barked, and within seconds, the holographic display zoomed in on the structure. And that's when he saw it. A pulse. Deep within the ruined station, something pulsed with energy, sending waves across the battlefield. A signal. No, a command. The station wasn't just a distress beacon. It was controlling something. Or someone. Rain's blood ran cold. It's not just a trap, he muttered. It's a battlefield control node. If that station was directing the enemy forces, then it was the key to turning the tide. But it was heavily damaged, its defenses weak. If they could take it out, maybe, just maybe, they could disrupt the enemy's coordination. But there was no time for careful planning. The Black Armada was being pushed back. It was now or never. Rain turned to his weapons officer, his voice ice-cold. Target that station. Full power. Blow it out of the stars. The order was given. The ironclad's cannons charged, glowing with lethal energy. Across the fleet, every available ship locked onto the target. And then, in a single coordinated strike, the Terran fleet unleashed destruction. The station stood no chance. The blast consumed it in a fireball so bright it outshone the stars. And then, silence. The enemy fleet hesitated, their movements faltering for the first time since the battle had begun. The connection had been severed. The Black Armada had just changed the game. Now, it was humanity's turn to strike back. The moment the station was reduced to burning wreckage, the enemy fleet hesitated. It was a fraction of a second, barely noticeable, but to seasoned warriors like Admiral Rain, it was everything. The ships that had moved with terrifying precision were now disoriented, their formations unraveling. The hive mind had lost its control node, and without it, they were vulnerable. Rain didn't waste time. All ships, full offensive, push forward, break their lines. His command was met with immediate action. The Black Armada surged forward, their weapons tearing through the enemy ranks. Railguns fired relentlessly, cutting through armor like paper. Nuclear-tipped missiles detonated in brilliant explosions, consuming multiple ships at once. The tide of battle had shifted. But even as the enemy faltered, they didn't retreat. Whatever intelligence controlled them was still fighting, still adapting. Their ships restructured into smaller formations, acting independently rather than as a unified force. They weren't mindless. They were learning. And that made them even more dangerous. The battle became a brutal slugfest. One by one, enemy ships fell, but so did Terran warships. A destroyer beside the ironclad took a direct hit, its hull splitting apart as it was consumed by fire. Another ship, the Hammerfall, rammed an enemy vessel, sacrificing itself in a desperate bid to take the enemy down. Explosions rippled across the battlefield, a deadly dance of fire and destruction. "They're not running," one of the officers muttered. "They're fighting to the last." Rain's jaw tightened. He had seen this kind of desperation before. It wasn't just programming. It wasn't just tactics. It was a belief. This enemy, whoever they were, believed in something so strongly that they were willing to die for it. And that made them a threat unlike any other. Then, without warning, the remaining enemy ships changed course. Not to flee, but to charge. A final, suicidal push. The largest of their vessels, a massive battlecruiser, was heading straight for the ironclad, weapons blazing. It was a ship-to-ship deathmatch, and Rain knew there was no time to maneuver. Brace for impact. The enemy ship fired its main cannon, a pulse of energy so powerful it tore through the ironclad's outer layers, sending sparks flying across the bridge. Alarms blared, systems overloaded, but the ship held together. "Return fire." Everything we've got. The Black Armada responded with overwhelming force. Torpedoes, railguns, plasmables, all aimed at the incoming behemoth. The enemy ship took hit after hit, its hull cracking, breaking apart piece by piece. And yet it kept coming. Rain gritted his teeth, hit the reactor. End it now. A single, well-placed shot from the ironclad's main cannon struck true. The enemy ship's core detonated, a chain reaction ripping through its structure. It exploded in a massive fireball, sending shockwaves across the battlefield. The enemy fleet, what remained of it, collapsed. With their strongest warship destroyed, the remaining vessels lost their cohesion. Some tried to fight. Some tried to flee. But the Black Armada did not show mercy. One by one, the enemy ships were hunted down and eliminated. And then, after what felt like an eternity, the battle was over. The silence that followed was deafening. Rain stood amidst the wreckage, his crew breathing heavily, the reality of what had just happened settling in. They had won, but the cost had been high. Dozens of Terran ships lay in ruins, thousands of lives lost. And yet, something gnawed at him. This wasn't a war they had started. Something had lured them here. The distress signal, the trap, the enemy's suicidal last stand. It all pointed to a deeper mystery, a mystery that had nearly cost humanity everything. And Rain knew one thing for certain. This war wasn't over. It was just beginning. The battlefield was a graveyard of burning wreckage. The once mighty enemy fleet had been reduced to drifting husks, their lifeless ships floating aimlessly in the void. Fires still raged in the shattered remains of the Hammerfall and several other Terran warships, the price of victory evident in every twisted piece of metal. The Black Armada had won, but at a terrible cost. Admiral Rain stood on the bridge of the ironclad, his eyes scanning the carnage outside. His crew was exhausted, their bodies slumped over consoles, barely able to process the magnitude of what had just happened. Yet, even as the silence of space settled over the battlefield, a lingering unease gnawed at him. This wasn't a normal war. This wasn't an enemy driven by conquest or greed. This was something else. Something far worse. Admiral. A voice broke through his thoughts. It was Lieutenant Hayes, his communications officer. Her face was pale, her hands trembling as she stared at her console. "We're picking up another signal." Rain's heart clenched. "From where?" "The same coordinates as the distress beacon," Hayes whispered. "But it's different this time. It's not a distress call anymore." The room went dead silent. Every officer, every crew member on the bridge turned toward her, waiting for an explanation. Hayes hesitated, then played the signal over the ship's speakers. It was a voice, distorted, alien, but unmistakably sentient. The words were garbled at first, breaking through layers of interference, but as the translation systems worked, they became chillingly clear. "You were not supposed to win." Rain's blood ran cold. "What the hell does that mean?" The voice continued, crackling with an eerie calm. "This was only the beginning. The test was necessary. We needed to see what you are." A pit formed in Rain's stomach. This hadn't been an invasion. It hadn't been a war for territory. It had been an experiment, a test. Humanity had been baited into this battle, forced to reveal their full military strength. And now, something had been watching, studying. "Who are you?" Rain demanded, his voice sharp, but the signal gave no direct answer. "You fight like the ones before you." But they fell. "Will you?" And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the transmission cut off. Silence once again filled the bridge, but this time, it was a different kind of silence. A suffocating, oppressive silence. Rain exhaled slowly, his mind racing. The enemy had never expected to lose, but now that they had, they were adapting, preparing for something bigger, something worse. "Admiral," Hayes said hesitantly, "we have incoming data packets from the destroyed station. It looks like navigational coordinates, deep space, far beyond any known sectors. Rain's jaw tightened. A challenge, a warning, or maybe an invitation. The battle was over, but the real war had just begun, and the Black Armada would be ready. The cold void of space was eerily quiet in the aftermath of the battle. Wreckage floated aimlessly, twisted metal and shattered hulls, marking the graves of countless warriors. The Black Armada had emerged victorious, but the enemy's final transmission lingered in every mind like a ghostly whisper. Admiral Rain stood at the bridge, his hands clenched behind his back, staring at the vast expanse of destruction before him. The distress signal that had lured them here was never a cry for help. It was a trap, a calculated test of their strength. And now, whoever had orchestrated it knew exactly what humanity was capable of. The realization left a bitter taste in his mouth. "Sir," Lieutenant Hayes broke the silence, her voice uneasy. "We've decrypted the last of the data packets from the enemy station." Rain turned to her. "What did you find?" Hayes hesitated, her fingers twitching over her console. "Coordinates, sir. Deep space, far beyond any explored sectors. It's almost like they wanted us to find them." The room tensed. The enemy hadn't just been watching. They were inviting humanity into the unknown. Rain studied the numbers flashing on the holographic display. This wasn't just some random location. It was precise, a destination waiting to be reached. The enemy had underestimated humanity once, and they had paid the price for it. But now, they had changed tactics. This was something new, something dangerous. "This is a mistake," Commander Voss muttered, stepping forward. "They set this up. It's another trap. We just barely survived this ambush. And now they want to lead us into unknown space. We shouldn't take the bait. And if we don't," Rain countered, "if we sit back and do nothing, we give them the advantage. They learn. They adapt. And the next time they come, they'll be ready for us. We might not win so easily next time." The room fell silent, the weight of his words pressing down on every soul present. They had survived because they had struck first, because the enemy had not expected the sheer ferocity of human warfare. But this was different. This was the start of something far greater. "We can't ignore this," Rain said firmly. "If we wait, we hand them control of the battlefield. I won't let humanity be caught off guard." "Sir," Hayes interrupted, her voice laced with urgency. "We're detecting movement." Every head snapped toward her. "Where? Not here," she clarified. "At the coordinates in the transmission." A chill ran through the crew. The enemy wasn't waiting for them to decide. They were already moving. Something was happening at that location, and they had no idea what it was. "Damn it," Voss cursed. "They knew we'd be listening." "Exactly," Rain said, narrowing his eyes. "They wanted us to hear them. And now, they're daring us to respond." The room remained tense. They had options, none of them good. If they pursued, they might walk straight into another ambush. If they hesitated, they might lose their only chance to strike first. Rain exhaled sharply. He had made his decision the moment he heard that signal. "Set course for the coordinates," he commanded. "Full fleet formation. If they want us to follow, then we'll follow. But this time, we're not walking into their trap. This time, we're setting our own." The bridge came alive with movement, officers relaying orders, engines roaring to life as the Black Armada prepared for its next move. Humanity had faced the unknown before. They had been underestimated before. But this time, there would be no mistakes. Whoever was waiting for them at those coordinates had better be ready. Because humanity was coming. The Black Armada moved like a shadow through the void, its warships cutting through space with deadly precision. Engines burned cold and silent, masking their approach as they neared the coordinates transmitted by the enemy. Admiral Rain stood on the bridge of the ironclad, his gaze locked on the growing image before them. A dark, uncharted region of space. The unknown awaited them, but this time, They would not be caught off guard. The enemy had tested humanity, had studied their tactics, their strength. Now, it was humanity's turn to return the favor. "We're entering the designated sector," Lieutenant Hayes reported, her voice tense. "Scanners detecting something, sir. Massive structures. Artificial." A deep frown formed on Rain's face. "Put it on the main display." The holographic screen flickered to life, revealing a sight that sent a chill through the bridge. Before them stretched an immense station, a colossal structure floating in the darkness. It was unlike anything they had seen before, vast, ancient, and ominous. The surface was layered with unfamiliar technology, pulsing with eerie, blue energy veins. But it wasn't just a station. There were ships, hundreds of them, lining the outskirts like silent sentinels. Massive warships dwarfed even the ironclad. They had walked into the lion's den. The enemy had been waiting. "Sir," Hayes hesitated, "they know we're here." As if in response, the station flickered with activity. Signals flared, weapons systems powered up, and a formation of enemy ships broke away from the larger fleet, moving directly toward the Black Armada. They were outnumbered, outgunned. But humanity had never let that stop them before. "All ships, battle stations," Rain ordered, his voice steady. "We came to send a message, and we're going to deliver it loud and clear." The Black Armada shifted into formation, gunships moving into defensive positions as their dreadnoughts charged their rail cannons. Tension crackled through the comms as targeting systems locked onto the approaching fleet. Then, a transmission cut through the silence. The same voice from before. Cold, calculating. "You should not have come." Rain smirked. "You sent us an invitation. It would have been rude to ignore it." A pause. Then the enemy spoke again. "This is not a battlefield, human. This is where civilizations are weighed, judged. Those who come here either prove their worth, or they are erased." The holographic display flickered, revealing ancient wreckage drifting in the void. Shattered remains of other fleets, other species who had failed whatever test the enemy had set. Humanity was just the latest contender. "Then I hope you're ready for a different outcome," Rain said, his voice sharp. "Because we don't break. We don't kneel. And we sure as hell don't lose." A moment of silence. Then, the enemy ships accelerated. The battle erupted in an instant. The void lit up with streaks of energy fire, railgun slugs, and missile trails as both fleets clashed. The ironclad roared forward, its main cannons tearing through enemy shields as fighters weaved between capital ships in a deadly dance. Human ingenuity met alien precision, and for the first time, the enemy faced an opponent that refused to fight on their terms. Rain barked orders, directing fire where it was needed, predicting enemy maneuvers before they made them. The Black Armada fought with the ferocity of a species that had clawed its way to the stars, that had survived its own brutal history, that had learned to turn every battle into a lesson in dominance. The enemy ships faltered. They had not expected such resistance. Their formations broke, and the humans exploited every weakness with ruthless efficiency. The station, once a symbol of power, now became a battlefield. Then, the final act of defiance. A massive surge of energy erupted from the station, a last-ditch effort to erase the threat before them. A superweapon. Desperation. But humanity had seen this before. Rain's lips curled into a grin. Fire everything. The Black Armada unleashed hell. Railguns, plasma cannons, and torpedoes converged in a synchronized strike, hammering into the station's core. The energy surge collapsed in on itself, and in the next moment, the entire structure detonated in a blinding explosion. The shockwave rippled through space, tearing through what remained of the enemy fleet. When the light faded, the battlefield was silent. The Black Armada stood victorious. The enemy had issued a challenge, had dared to test humanity's strength, and they had learned the hard way. Humanity was not to be tested. They were to be feared. As the remaining enemy ships flood into the void, Rain exhaled, watching them disappear. "Send a message," he said. "Let the galaxy know. We're done proving ourselves. From now on, we're the ones watching." The war wasn't over. It was only beginning. But one thing was certain: the enemy would never underestimate humanity again.